On November 9th, 1979, a Scottish forestry worker would have one of the most famous extraterrestrial encounters in the history of the country. Bob Taylor showed up to work expecting to have a normal day of work, however his experience would be anything but. In time, this case became famous for being the first UFO sighting to be subject of a police criminal investigation. In fact, this case has never been solved, and the lead investigator on it has pointed out the unexplainable physical evidence found at the scene. In this episode, we will examine the extraordinary story of Bob Taylor, a case that became to be known as the Livingston Incident, or sometimes the Taylor Incident. Around 10:30 a.m. on November 9th, 1979, Bob Taylor, who was employed by the Livingston Development Corporation, drove his truck and parked at the bottom of Detchmont Law. Detchmont Law is a hill that sits in West Livingston, Scotland. Along with his dogs, Bob began climbing the hill for his daily routine, checking fences and gates. As Bob crested one portion of the hill, he would be stunned to see something incredible. In a clearing not too far away, Bob saw a dome-shaped object around 20 feet across and 30 feet high. The object was dark and had looked like it was rough sandpaper. Next, what happened would truly be shocking. A curious Bob and his dogs approached the craft, and two balls came down from the ship. They were around 3 feet across with metal spikes protruding through them. They began rolling towards Bob and attached themselves to his pants. Bob's dogs were barking furiously, but it clearly wasn't stopping the objects. The two balls began pulling Bob closer to the larger craft, and Bob smelled some type of burning odor. He would then pass out. Bob next woke up on the ground, and he would be perplexed about what had happened. He had a terrible headache, a sore throat, and a bitter taste for some reason in his mouth. He believes he was unconscious for around 20 minutes. The UFO and the two small balls were gone, but Bob was disheveled. He struggled to walk, but finally got back down to his truck. After a short time driving, due to the experience, he drove into a ditch and was forced to walk home. As he got home, Bob's wife would be stunned to see him. His clothes were torn and muddy, and he had scrapes all over his body. She called the police and a doctor, and soon Bob would take the police to the site of the incident. There, the clearing had strange indentations which appeared like ladder marks. There were also indentations where the balls had rolled up Bob. Detective Con Ian Wark, a crime scene investigator and detective that worked that day, said that he had found strange marks on the ground that day. Detective Wark said there were around 32 holes, around 3.5 inches in diameter, and also marks very much like those of tracks left by bulldozers. The holes seemed to align with the proportions of the balls described by Bob. The police report from that day would indicate something that weighed tons was in the clearing. However, there were no tracks coming into the clearing, not to mention it was a difficult place for heavy machinery to access. In addition, records from companies using heavy machinery in the area didn't indicate that anything was there that day, nor did Bob's employer. Something had caused these massive indentations, but there was simply no logical explanation. In 2019, Detective Wark would tell the BBC he interviewed Bob 3 times back then, and his story stayed consistent each time. The police opened a criminal investigation into the matter, but were never able to solve it. In time, this became an incredibly popular case in Scotland and the United Kingdom, even posting a plaque where the event alleged to take place occurred. There's been many individuals who have studied the case over the years, both ufologists and skeptics. Skeptic Stuart Scamble investigated the event and believed the indentations were caused by PVC pipes laid nearby. He also stated that Bob might have had an epileptic seizure that caused him to pass out. However, neither of these explanations hold up very well to scrutiny. PVC pipes are smooth and would have left a different indentation in the area, not to mention there's no evidence that they were even stacked there. Supporters of the event taking place, including ufologist Malcolm Robinson, point out tears in Bob's pants can't really be explained by him crawling. Bob's pants were police issued and they wouldn't have been ripped from him crawling on the ground. It's important to point out as well that Bob was a respected member of the community. Bob was a war hero and an avid member of the church. There wasn't much doubt about if Bob was lying. It's just some people think he was mistaken and there might be another explanation. Still, it appears no one has been able to explain the strange indentations after all these years. While Bob could have made up or imagined the whole story, the fact is he couldn't have fabricated the physical evidence at the scene. In 2007, Bob would pass away. He never changed or wavered on his story.